What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing the possibility that there was actually a real immortal vampire in New Orleans. Now, I believe there are many, and I believe they are everywhere, but this just might be, maybe, the choice is yours, a documented and factual case of a real vampire, a real immortal vampire having existed in New Orleans way back in the day. I know we discuss vampires semi-regularly on this channel, but it's only because you guys seem to enjoy it, and also I'm obsessed, I'll admit it. I am on the hunt for anything that I can get my hands on that may actually lead to the discovery, even if it's not a personal one, of real immortal vampires. For better or for worse, I'm completely enmeshed in this particular topic and all of the disappointing research that comes with it. Since you guys don't seem to mind very much, I'm taking you all along for the ride with me. I've discussed the most credible encounters I could find. I've brought to you the Casket Girls of New Orleans legends and a few other things sprinkled in here and there involving this particular topic. However, I recently came across an article, that's all, just one, about an alleged real immortal vampire from back in the day in, of course, no other place than New Orleans, Louisiana, USA. Now, when I say that I came across one article, that means one article where I felt the information was strong enough, reasonable enough for me to be able to present it to you here. So with that being said, I'm willing to give this article and the information contained therein the benefit of the doubt, and I thought, if nothing else, it would at least make for an interesting topic of discussion. Don't forget to keep sending me in your creepy personal encounter tales with everything supernatural, extraterrestrial, paranormal, and otherworldly, even though I've been extremely slow to put together another listener encounters. I'm getting there, don't worry, as always. Thanks for your patience with this hot mess. Also, if you guys have things that you want me to cover, just email me or text me or leave it in the comments. Not true crime though, okay? That's a whole other thing. I'm talking paranormal, supernatural, extraterrestrial, otherworldly, etc. Email info and all that good stuff will be in the description box below the video. Just a heads up. I try my best to stay away from true crime, guys, because some sad and rather uncomfortable experiences I have had with family members of the deceased. So that's why normally those suggestions or requests go unanswered. All right, let's get back to the topic at hand. Throughout history, and most likely since the dawn of time itself, there have been people, such as ourselves, or at least a handful of us and those like us, who have been remarkably odd, definitely different, and downright mysterious, who have left their mark on the people who crossed paths with them, again, for better or for worse. Some of these people were these things to such an extreme, they seem to have left an indelible mark on society in general, at least as far as the time when they existed is concerned. Many of these people who were considered bizarre, strange, and even sometimes downright evil way back in the day have become sympathetic figures now who we know mostly are harmless, misunderstood, and even just a little bit different than those around them and what was acceptable for society in which they happen to live. So forward thinkers, right? People who thought and were ahead of their time, who were, burnt at the stake for being a witch or locked away in asylums. It's sad, and I'm being facetious as always, but it did happen, guys. And nowadays they'd be celebrated. Sometimes though, these particular outcasts seem to have come from nowhere and they vanish right back into wherever it was they came from just as mysteriously. Since we're discussing vampires here, the real kind, it's only fitting that this person who is said to have possibly been a real blood-sucking immortal creature of the night comes from the legendary vampire headquarters, New Orleans, Louisiana. Of course, too, this person is said to have existed before there would ever be any way of establishing any sort of evidentiary proof to back it all up that they existed. Let's go now to New Orleans in the early 1900s and jump right in. One day, a mysterious stranger rode into town on a horse and buggy carriage and took up residence at the opulent residence of 1039 Royal Street. He called himself Jacques Saint Germain, and no one had ever seen or heard of him before this. He was very obvious though, and didn't by any means try to blend in or stay hidden from the society he was mostly and most obviously very different from right from the door. Now, there were some with whom he fit in right away. With his exquisite way of dressing himself, his obvious wealth, and his fantastic charm and wit, Saint Germain was obviously a man of great means and well educated, and these characteristics left a mark on all of those he came across. Jacques was said to spend money as though he had an unlimited supply of it, or as we would say where I come from, like he was printing his own bills. And very quickly, he started throwing lavish and decadent parties for the city's most wealthy, powerful, and elite citizens. Even after a bunch of the aforementioned higher class citizens had attended a few of these parties at his luxurious home, no one still seemed to know much about the handsome and dashing, seemingly very young stranger. He spoke English, French, and Spanish fluently, and if he was to be believed about his travels, which he excitedly told elaborate stories of to anyone who seemed the least bit interested, then he was also very, very worldly as well. He was extremely intelligent, and it didn't take long for him to become the talk of the town among both the elite and the so-called marginalized of the modern society of the day. Despite it being very obvious the young stranger didn't want to give away any real details about who he was or where he had come from, it mattered very little, like it didn't matter at all to the people he soon found himself in the constant company of. He was young, he was good looking, and he was rich. Nothing else mattered beyond that. That's just how it was back in those simpler times. People overlooked the minor detail of him never divulging any personal information about himself, and some even found that charming in and of itself. Just as it didn't take long for him to be noticed for all of the aforementioned dazzling reasons, it didn't take long in a society like this for his little eccentricities to start being noticed as well. He was almost never, or never ever, depending on who is to be believed, seen out and about in the daytime. And while it was known back then, just as it is today, that the daytime is obviously for nothing more to the young and unencumbered youth than to sleep off the previous night's festivities and bad choices, it was much harder for people to overlook some of the oddities Mr. St. Germain exhibited. He would often, while beguiling others with stories of exotic travels to far-flung places, start talking about far-off time periods with a strange sort of familiarity and ease that shouldn't have been possible for even the most educated and book-smart person. He would discuss things that had happened sometimes centuries in the past as though he had been right there watching, say, the gladiators of ancient Rome duel or the public decapitation of Marie Antoinette, as though he had been right there in the crowd cheering. After a while, he started boldly proclaiming that he was a direct descendant of Comte St. Germain, whose life was almost as mysterious as Jacques' was. Comte was a European adventurer and philosopher, as well as a very prominent member of high society back in the 1700s. So 2 centuries before Jacques came to New Orleans and was doing weird things and being awesome, he proclaimed that he was related to this guy from 2 centuries earlier. As far as Comte was concerned, he was also known to be a close personal friend, diplomat, and advisor to King Louis XV. For the most part, the people that would listen to him tell these stories about his lineage and where he had been and all that, they just chalked it up to him being a bit overzealous and wanting to really fit in with them. After all, they thought, who wouldn't want to impress them? These people thought so very highly of themselves, they considered it an act of butt kissing, that it seemed this man was lying through his teeth right to their faces. And they smiled and gritted their teeth as they pretended to listen to his seemingly pretentious, braggadocious stories. So basically, they were like, oh, he's so desperate to impress us because we're so rich and powerful and we're Supermen that we're just going to pretend that we believe him because he's cute and he has money, so fits right in. Forget about the fact that he's obviously lying. But was he lying? By the way, he told these kind of stories all the time. He was constantly talking about himself and the people and things he knew, but never once, not once, did he ever talk about himself in such a way as to even allude as to where he might have actually been from or what brought him to New Orleans in the first place. It seemed as though no one even cared how he had earned such immense wealth, and the high society folks in New Orleans at the time only cared that he was sharing it so graciously with them. They basically took it all with a grain of salt, and some of them even believed he was at least related to Comte St. Germain. They were both spectacularly wealthy, both greatly resembled each other. If this stranger was to be believed that they shared a surname and they were both mysterious figures who no one really could ever claim to have actually known much about. However, after a while, and with the way things were back in this time period, and especially in this particular area, people started to not only whisper of the great resemblance between the two men, but there started to be whispers that they were in fact one and the same person. While most people nowadays and back in the day would hear this and immediately think it's absolutely ludicrous, I would first, before you jump to any unreasonable and possibly premature conclusions, remind you again of the time in which all of this was happening. I would also point you toward the pictures and other information online claiming some celebrities are centuries old that have alleged photographic evidence to back it up. I'm not saying I believe these celebrity photo things one way or the other, but I will admit I find them interesting and fascinating. That's even possibly with them standing apart from my lifelong fascination with real immortal vampires. So even without it being a possibility that they're vampires, the Keanu Reeves, the Jay-Z picture, the Nicolas Cage one, have you guys seen those? Okay, so people were starting to believe that there wasn't any relation except that the two Saint Germains were one and the same person. For the most part, this only led to further interest in the mystery of who he was and didn't immediately send people running for the hills with pitchforks and torches, screaming in the night, "Vampire!" as they mobbed down the block toward his opulent and grand home. I mean, these people were socialites and they were far too dignified for any of that. Plus, the talk wasn't yet that he was a vampire, but that he had somehow, while out in the world along his travels as Comte Saint Germain, found the secret to eternal life, perhaps in some form of a fountain of youth or something similar, and not in the blood-sucking way that immortal vampires are nowadays known to come across this secret. The people started by comparing Jacques to portraits of Comte and noticed they looked more than similar. The likeness and similarities were uncanny. They looked exactly identical. Both were abnormally handsome and they had the same eyes. Even the moles on their faces were identical and in the exact same spots. They were both about 40 years old, with Jacques, of course, claiming to actually be a little bit younger than that, and the portrait of Comte having been taken when he claimed to have been around that age. Guys, I don't know. I've seen the portrait of Comte Saint Germain and I really don't understand. I guess maybe if that was all there was to look at, and given how people without money were forced to live back then and in that time period, I don't know, but I may have purposely become an old widow spinster or something. Like, kill me now. I don't know. I'm of course, I love that word facetious. I'm being facetious. But I'm talking as far as him, Comte, supposedly being abnormally handsome. Just an aside, I am sincerely working on many things for the improvements to the channel, and one of them is better editing, so I'll be able to do things like include video and audio clips and show photos in instances like this. Until then, please Google images of Comte Saint Germain, COMTESTGERMAIN. Please do it, because this guy was said to look exactly like Jacques, who is the subject of our story, and they said he was abnormally handsome, like supernaturally so. So the people got this in their heads that Jacques was an immortal and that he simply changed his name from Comte to Jacques and moved to America in order to throw people off of his scent. Helping this rumor along beautifully, though he did so unknowingly, was the fact that Comte himself always claimed to have been hundreds of years old. Comte. It said that whenever Comte had had a little bit too much to drink or was otherwise feeling especially emboldened, he would proclaim to the masses and whoever would listen that he was indeed an immortal and had found the fountain of youth and secret to eternal life. He would never give the secret up and act coy when he would be asked for further details in the moment, or the next time someone who had heard him say this would bring it up. So he'd proclaim this when he was drunk or, I don't know, smoking opium, whatever he did. And the next day people would be like, "Hey, do you remember you said, like you're immortal?" And he'd be like, "I don't know what you're talking about." In fact, a famous Italian author, adventurer, historian, and alleged fantastic womanizer named Girolamo Casanova, yes, that Casanova, wrote in his memoirs about Comte Saint Germain thus, quote, "This extraordinary man, intended by nature to be the king of impostors and quacks, would say in an easy, assured manner that he was 300 years old, that he knew the secret of the universal medicine, that he possessed a mastery over nature, that he could melt diamonds, professing himself capable of forming out of 10 or 12 small diamonds one large one of the finest water without any loss of weight. All this," he said, "were a mere trifle to him, notwithstanding his boastings, his barefaced lies, and his manifold eccentricities. I cannot say I thought him offensive. In spite of my knowledge of what he was, and in spite of my own feelings, I thought him an astonishing man, as he was always astonishing me," end quote. I literally laughed out loud when I first read this because it goes to show how incredibly fake and phony people will be sometimes, still in today's modern world, for the sake of being polite and in order to continue to be able to mock someone behind their back. Something else that people who were often at his parties or otherwise in his presence found very odd about Jacques, which people were also known to have been curious about when it came to Conti, was the fact that neither ever seemed to eat. No one ever came forward to say that they had ever seen either man take but a single bite of food. This was especially noticeable for Jacques due to the fact that he threw such decadent and lavish parties almost on a weekly basis, if not sometimes nightly, and though his guests ate and drank like kings and queens and almost gorged themselves on the delicious foods he laid out for them time after time after time, people finally started to notice that he never took a bite of any of it. He would talk to people as they ate and sit at the table with them in more intimate settings, but he would only drink from a chalice and only red wine. I don't know if that belongs in quotes, but was it red wine? We may find out something different later. I'm just saying. He literally never ate. This point was really stressed regarding both men, and I tend to believe it. If I were to believe even some of the rest of this strange tale, because if the rest is to be believed, then maybe he was drinking blood, and the reason he didn't eat was because vampires don't eat. I am of the belief they can eat, but that it does nothing for them, so most of the time they choose not to. Vampires are often said to amuse themselves with the company of humans and to enjoy watching them do human things like eat and breathe. Casanova also wrote about this in his memoirs. Geez, obsessed much, guy? Again, about Comte Saint-Germain, quote, "The most enjoyable dinner I had was with Madame de Robert Gergy, who came with the famous adventurer known by the name of the Count de Saint-Germain. This individual, instead of eating, talked from the beginning of the meal to the end, and I followed his example in one respect, as I did not eat, but listened to him with my greatest attention. It may safely be said that as a conversationalist, he was unequaled," end quote. This all started out as mere speculation and whispers among the crowd, with people half-jokingly commenting to one another that the two men were one and the same, and that perhaps he had found some elixir of life that made him immortal. So it was kind of like a joke, I guess. However, these little wise remarks and mocking jokes turned into something much more sinister very quickly. Soon people were commenting that perhaps instead of some elixir of life being the culprit, that perhaps vampirism was what had made him an immortal. It's said that many people even came to just accept this as fact. They quote unquote knew Jacques was in fact Comte and that he wasn't only immortal but an actual blood-sucking vampire as well. They kind of just rolled with it. They never mentioned it to his face that they truly believed this, and they continued to keep company with him, albeit a little more warily after some of them came to this conclusion and started spreading it around. Of course, it didn't take long for the man himself to hear the rumors circulating about him, and he seemed to take great joy and amusement from it all. He didn't try to deny it, and in fact, it said he almost played to it and used it as conversational tools during his now infamous parties. He looked at it as nothing more than a game and helped to stoke the fires of the rumors himself. So Jacques was like, maybe I am a vampire. Just like Comte was like, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. You know what I'm saying? Like, he thought it was funny. Some would even say that this would have been the extent of the story of Jacques Saint-Germain. They say that he would have merely been a blip on the radar of history in the annals that hold all of the eccentric, ridiculously wealthy womanizers and playboys of history, had it not been for one seemingly irrelevant, except when you think about it in this context, incident that had occurred a few weeks after he had arrived in New Orleans. A woman seemed to have dropped out of one of the windows of his mansion on Royal Street. There were plenty of witnesses to the event and the people all along the street who had seen it happen, and they all said, every single one of them, that they had seen the whole thing and that the woman had, for whatever reason, chosen to jump out of the window herself. The woman didn't die, though. She was a prostitute, and she was much more terrified of what she had seemed to have gone through or seen inside of the home than from the fall itself. In other words, she risked jumping to her death out of the window rather than facing whatever it was she was confronted with in Saint-Germain's home. While being questioned by the police about the matter, the woman who jumped gave a rather odd explanation as to why she did so rather than just leave the company of Jacques Saint-Germain, like, hey, I don't want to be here anymore, and go and walk out the front door. Why not use some other ordinary means? Why did she choose to jump out the window? She claimed to the officer that was questioning her that Saint Germain had lunged at her and tried to ferociously bite her neck. She said she had fought him off with everything that she had, but that he was too strong and she had no choice but to take her chances in jumping out of the window and onto the street below, risking, I might add, possible death in the process. Saint Germain was already a well-respected and uber-wealthy member of high society by now, and he laughed the whole thing off. He was like, that chick is crazy. Going back to the night of the alleged incident, the girl did give her testimony to the cops, and Jacques denied it all, and even, as I just said, laughed the whole situation off, like she was nuts. Giving his standing in the community, especially as compared to hers, with him being this wealthy socialite, beloved man, and her being a lowly prostitute, the police told him not to worry about it and that everything would be worked out in the morning. He wasn't going to be in any kind of trouble and things like that. I wonder if they did a little song and dance and jig for him as well. It makes me so disappointed to even be a half member of the human race when I hear things like that. Anyway, the police didn't even give a second thought to what he was actually being accused of, trying to rip her throat out with his teeth. They brushed it off as a lowly, most likely drug-addled prostitute trying to shake a wealthy man down and ruin his honest reputation. The police actually told him that his being questioned was but a mere formality and that they had already known he had done nothing wrong. They did, though, simply need him to come down to the station in the morning, and he said that he would, the following morning. He said that he was traumatized by the whole incident, that's what he claimed, and that he needed rest before going over the matter again with them. Like, I don't want to talk about this right now, it's so traumatic, I can't believe this is happening, but I'll come by in the morning, you guys. Jacques Saint Germain was extremely polite and dutifully agreed to answer all of their questions the very next day. After a few minutes, he wished the officers a good night, and after he calmly closed his door, he vanished into the ether. Like, literally never seen or heard from again. But wait, there's more. So the next day, when he didn't show up to be questioned as he promised, you'd think the officers involved would have been even the least bit concerned for why he decided not to show up to answer a few simple questions. After all, he knew he wasn't going to get into any trouble. So you'd think the police would have even been a little suspicious of his failure to appear. Well, that's what you'd most likely be thinking, guys, but you would be wrong. The cops didn't think he was guilty of anything to begin with, and even his failure to show up to answer questions didn't make them question his guilt in the least. In fact, they simply figured that a man of his stature was more than likely embarrassed by the entire ordeal, and the fact that his name was now being associated with this obviously poor choice of a prostitute, and decided to let the whole thing go. They chalked it up to just that. He had picked the wrong woman. A prostitute who simply didn't know how to be discreet. They didn't want to further embarrass Jacques Saint Germain by pushing the issue any further. However, these officers involved did have superiors that they had to report to, and these superiors forced them to at least go and ask him to dispute the claims again in person at his home. So they're like, okay, maybe he doesn't want to come down here. He doesn't want people to see him coming in. You guys, you have to get something. You have to get some kind of record, because the night before they weren't keeping one because he was supposed to come down the next day. So the superiors are like, we have to get something on record. So go there, knock on his door like it's a hey, howdy, good day. Get him to dispute the claim, sign off on the paper, and that'll be the end of it. We'll sweep it all under the rug, and the poor girl can just live with the trauma. She's a prostitute anyway. I don't know if that's what was actually said, but it probably sounded something like that. I'm just saying. So these officers went reluctantly to the mansion on Royal Street to do just that. They were embarrassed themselves to have to push the issue, but the law was the law and the rules were the rules. He wasn't going to be charged with anything regardless of the outcome because of his money and standing in the community. When they got to his house and realized he wasn't there, they entered on their own. I don't know why they did this, if they were just looking for him or if like that's just what they did back then. From shows that I watch about vampires back in the day, it seems that the cops could just do that whenever they wanted to. They found that not only was he gone, but he had left behind most of his belongings. All of his furniture and a tremendous amount of valuables were still there, completely untouched. The second floor of the residence was a little weird, to say the least. It was said to be murky and very dimly lit. There were large blackout curtains on the windows, and they were extremely thick. They were closed, and it was pitch black in that part of the house. Jacques Saint Germain's bed was there as well, and all of his fancy clothes. They looked in the closets and everywhere they could think of to perhaps find some clue as to where he had gone. Was he coming right back, or did he abscond? They weren't looking for clues to the alleged crime. They were trying to decipher where he could have gone in the middle of the night and on such quick and short notice. They made a frightening and somewhat macabre discovery in the upstairs bedroom closet, though. Large containers filled with a mixture of red wine and human blood covered the floor of this extremely large walk-in closet. There were no clues whatsoever left behind as to his whereabouts, where he fled to, and no one ever saw or heard from him again. All that was left were the rumors and speculation that he was a centuries-old vampire who absconded in the dead of night lest he be found out. The blood and wine mixture the police found completely sealed the deal for everybody. Apparently, back then, the police were even worse than some of them are now, only all of them were like this in that they gossiped just as much as the rest of society back then. It didn't take long before everyone knew what was in those bottles that were in his closet. Now, the joking speculation that the man was perhaps a vampire who had lusted after blood and who was an immortal became a lot more serious. Now, people really, truly believed it. After all, why else would he flee in the middle of the night without so much as a goodbye and leaving behind all of his belongings that were worth a literal fortune back then? Like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stuff in today's money. So can you even imagine? Maybe a few $1 million in 1900s money. Why would he be so quick to escape the word of a lowly prostitute, even after the police literally told him he wasn't going to be in any trouble at all, and that they didn't believe the woman accusing him of trying to ferociously bite her neck? Well, it's because he must be a real-life immortal vampire. Even the biggest skeptic of the rumors found it hard to look away when people compared likenesses of Jacques to his supposed ancestor and now alleged alter ego, Mr. Comte Saint-Germain. They couldn't possibly have had that much of a resemblance, even if they were directly related blood relatives. The rumors and speculation went on and on like this and ran wild and rampant through the streets of New Orleans. The people who knew him best would compare the two men, saying they were both world-class travelers and definitely eccentrics. Neither could ever be said to have taken a single bite of even the most decadent food. They were both said to have boasted of being centuries old, and both were ladies' men who had had an almost uncanny ability to woo even the iciest of ice queens. They were both extremely secretive with actual details regarding personal information about themselves, despite their wild claims. And then, after all, as far as Jacques is concerned at least, there was the blood and wine mixture left behind in his mansion. There is another part to this story that might make you rethink your skepticism as well, and that's despite Casanova and others writing about him in their memoirs, and also despite the portraits painted of him that I've seen, despite knowing he was indeed a real person, there's not much history or factual documented evidence of the man's actual existence. The details of their lives were murky at best, and besides a portrait or two of Comte that anyone could have drawn and that could very well have been a made-up likeness, and some less than honorable mentions in a couple of few somewhat famous people's memoirs, Casanova, thank you, his life is a complete and total mystery. No one knew when he was born or where, what his real name was, how old he really was, etc. This made him ripe for the picking for being thrown into the madness that was the life of an equally mysterious and somewhat unknown, shadowy type figure who seemed to look exactly like him, who came to New Orleans with the same surname and exact same mannerisms and way of boasting a couple of centuries later. The reason for the speculation regarding the actual existence of Comte Saint-Germain, despite everything I just presented to you, which solidified the fact that he was a real person, was that he changed identity so often and moved around so much. He seemed to not want anyone to be able to keep track of him. Saint-Germain most likely wasn't even his real name. A woman named Jemima York, who is seemingly random because there's no title given to her, there's no reason as to why she made this statement, said of Comte, quote, "He is an odd creature, and the more I see him, the more curious I am to know something about him. He is everything with everybody. He talks ingeniously with Mr. Ray, philosophy with Lord Willoughby, and is gallant with Miss York, Miss Carpenter, and all of the young ladies. But the character and philosopher is what he seems to pretend to, and to be a good deal conceited of the others are put on to comply with les manières du monde. But that you are to suppose his real characteristic, and I can't but fancy he is a great pretender in all kinds of science, as well as that he really has acquired an uncommon share in some," end quote. I have no idea what that lady said. Honestly, I went over that quote multiple times. She adores him even though he's a lying, braggadocious, fake, phony. The point of all of the confusion surrounding him, meaning Comte, possibly having been compounded by my accidental clumsiness in trying to explain it all to you, my bad, mea culpa, is that it was very easy and possibly a coincidence, depending on what you believe, for this particular man to have been caught up in the vampire scandal that belongs now to both him and to Jacques Saint-Germain. Comte was more like a fictional character than a real person, as well as all of his other wild and bold claims, such as being centuries old and having found the elixir of life and immortality. Comte claimed to also have been an alchemist, and there are a few unverified accounts of him allegedly turning random metals into gold or creating the perfect diamonds out of impure ones. It's said by those who believe in the legend that he used the powers of alchemy and sorcery to indefinitely prolong his own life, making himself immortal, and with the price of having to become a blood-sucking vampire. I don't know, guys, like, I'm not even being facetious or funny, but maybe it's just I want to believe in it so bad because I believe it. I believe that Comte was Jacques. I believe that Comte found the secret to immortality, and in return he had to be a bloodsucker. Like, I believe it. Sorry, 100%. 100% believe it. He became a real creature of the night who roamed around city streets alone, lusting for blood and feeding off of the disadvantaged and marginalized while dazzling and becoming a part of the upper crust of society, the rich and wealthy socialite, in order to distract from what he was really doing in the nights after the parties ended and the last guest had closed the door behind him. It's also said that despite having been in the same place for many years, Comte never seemed to age a day. I'm not sure and couldn't find any information as to how long his predecessor or how long he himself resided in New Orleans, but from what I understand, it wasn't long enough for anyone to ever have become suspicious about his lack of aging. He was only there for like 2 or 3 months, maybe even less. The rumor mill said that Comte never died, and in fact, he merely took on new identities over the centuries, one of which was Jacques Saint-Germain, who would actually tell the secret to anyone who would listen, knowing full well no one would believe it. At least not until it was too late for them and he was already gone in the wind, so to speak. Now, on the other side of this vampire thing, it's entirely possible, and most people would say very plausible, that all of this was simply a legend that got too far out of hand. They explain this by saying Jacques was never seen in the daytime because he had a hard partying nightlife. He was merely sleeping it off. They say that once he realized how enthralled everyone was with the mystery of who he was, he got a kick out of it and decided not to speak of himself too often, except to boast and joke about things like being related to a somewhat famous character who may or may have not shared the last surname as him, but who looked a lot like him, and talking about being hundreds of years old. Maybe he was merely an eccentric person who knew a lot about the man whose last name he either shared or chose to share, and he took on his personality for the sake of boasting some sort of distant relation. Biting women's necks and drinking wine with blood could have been kinks that just went to show how odd and strange and misfitty he really was. Maybe he was some sort of criminal and didn't want to risk dealing with the police. Maybe it was all just one big coincidence and misunderstanding. As for me, as most of you already know, and for those of you who don't or forgot, I'll say it once again. I don't believe in coincidence. Not at all, not ever. Okay? That's right, guys. I believe in this one, okay? And that's why I brought it here to all of you. It's more fun and thrilling for me to believe that this man existed and that he was an actual and true real life vampire. Maybe he's still lurking out there today, either nearby or in some far distant place, trying to make the most out of our overfilmed and surveilled society. Our obsession with filming people in the streets and weird things we just happen upon that go bump in the night. Maybe he is my true soulmate and will appear one day and turn me into one of the true immortals. I will say, though, that there wasn't much verifiable information in all that I just presented to you, but again, sometimes it's simply more fun that way. Let me know what you all think in the comments below, please. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, if you just want to see me smile. Spread the love by sharing this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Like I said, the likes, the positive comments, the sharing out. Please, 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 guys, watch the video all the way through. I really, really appreciate you. Please check out the description box for some important links, how to donate to the channel, PayPal, Cash App, Patreon. If you join my Patreon for $20 a month or more, you will receive once a month a personal intuitive oracle reading from me as a thank you. If you're interested in a personal intuitive oracle reading with me, either face-to-face or remotely, if you're interested in some of my manifestation intention, energy, clearing sprays, homemade bath salts, witch salt, spell jars, crystal kits, I sell all kinds of things. The website just isn't up yet, and I don't even want to talk about it, okay? Don't want to talk about it. It's coming soon. Doing big things, guys. Or if you want an autographed copy of my book, if you have any questions about the things that I sell, if you have any questions about Intuitive Oracle, come on over on Wednesday nights from 7:15-ish p.m. Eastern Time to 11-ish p.m. Eastern Time, depending on how many people we have to read for. Right here on this channel, it's myself and Ghost Dragon ZW, and I will read for you one random card from a random deck, and I will channel a message from Spirit and give it to you for your week for free or donation only. My books, Missing the Faith Theory, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories, and Shadow Entities, Sleep Paralysis, and Beyond, all available on Amazon, the Kindle and paperback versions with links in the description box. If you want an autographed copy, again, for anything else, just email me at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. If you're interested in buying something, or if you have any questions that aren't in the description box, that the answers aren't in the description box, email me for anything. Send me your encounters with the supernatural, paranormal, extraterrestrial, otherworldly, please. And again, guys, watch the video all the way through. Like it. My channel is growing. I'm so proud of this channel. On Thursday nights, you can find myself, Ghost Dragon ZW, and Miss Paranormal Pixie Lara from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, chillaxin' and chatting at Chillaxin Chat. Come on in, hang out with us, talk about everything and nothing all at once. Spirituality, crystals, extraterrestrial. I mean, it's just about the community, right? It's late, I'm tired, I'm forgetting so many things, but show your support in any way that you can. Just by showing up, watching the video all the way through, that totally works. Liking, sharing, subscribing. I know I said it many times, I am tired, but it is so true. Those things really do help. My Amazon wish list gift link in the description box as well. Once again, thank you guys so much for all of your support and for always showing up for me and just being awesome. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Remember, always be kind to yourself as well, and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today, you are awesome, you are amazing, you are beautiful, you are fantastic, you are wonderful, you are capable, you can do this. Abundance and blessing are your birthright. If you think you can't, you definitely can. I believe in you. You are strong, you are capable, you are amazing. I believe in you. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.